Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my latest live stream. Great to see you. Thank you for coming along. I'm just going to give it a few moments to make sure that the live streaming is working. So we've got YouTube, Facebook and LinkedIn. LinkedIn seems to be behaving today, which is interesting. YouTube seems to be working. We've got some people on there. Hello, everyone on YouTube. And then Facebook as well. That's fantastic. So that seems to be working. Right then, great. Well, welcome to my next live stream. So we're going to continue today working through the Boeing Starliner case study. We're going to talk about the various challenges associated with STAMP, STPA and CAST. And of course, if you've got any questions, comments, concerns, compliments or commiserations, please type them in the chat and I'll get to them as we're going through this. But just be mindful, there is about 30 seconds to a minute delay between you typing something, me seeing it and being able to respond. Fantastic. So let's get stuck into it then. So let's press the button. There we go. Full screen. Look, it works. It still works. Fantastic. Okay, so here is the Boeing Starliner report. So this is from February 2026, and so far we've got through most of this stuff. We've got through the helium leak in the last couple of live streams. We started to work through the de-orbit capability and fault tolerance, and then we're moving into observations and recommendations, and then section 4.8, common observations and organisational factors. So let's go right to it then. There we go. So let's take our little jigsaw piece, because we need one of these, and I still need to make it available for download. Right, there we go. So section 471. Observations and recommendations. So observation number one, in fact what I'll do is I'll grab my little black divider lines so I can see where everything is. So observation number one, safety review -1. Observation number two, observation number three, observation, no, that's 7. Okay, so there's various parts to this. That's organisational factor 7 with a recommendation. Let's put some boxes around it like we did the other day so it's easier to see. Pardon me, so we've got a recommendation there, recommendation 12, recommendation 11, recommendation 10, recommendation number 9, recommendation number 8. So observational safety review, sorry, observation 1, observation 2, recommendation, observation, recommendation, organisational factor. It's a little bit confusing, that, I'll be honest. A bit confusing for me, for my simple mind. Here we go. So observation 1, safety review number 1. NASA performed the phase 1 safety review process with Boeing during the CPC funding phase of CST 100. So the CPC funding phase is a particular time period I'm interpreting. And this was after the service module PDR. Wouldn't it be nice if there was a timeline, just to sort of show these different events? That's one of the recommendations I always suggest when doing investigations. Stick an appendix in with the timeline of significant events and have one which sort of highlights the main ones to do with the accident itself, but then a supplementary timeline that shows the pre-accident, pre-incident circumstances, sequence of events, because it really helps the investigators, but also the audience that's looking at this investigation report. The service module propulsion system design, reviewed by the NASA safety panel, did not support meeting the 2 fault tolerance for re-entry requirement. So was it the design didn't support the 2 fault tolerance requirement, which I think that's what it is, or is it also that the safety panel did not support the meeting of those requirements? It's a bit ambiguous. I'm sure it'll become clearer as we go through this. So the phase 1 safety review should typically be performed prior to the preliminary design review And you'll notice I'm highlighting these two as candidates for inclusion in the control structure model. Because, these reviews, they provide information to each other over a period of time. And that information provision might not be direct. It might be that it's documented in some kind of minutes or some kind of review report. And then that review report is used as an input to the other reviews, the knock-on reviews later on. Now that's interesting there. There's a procedure there. So I've highlighted that as a candidate for inclusion in the control structure, not because it's a controller per se, but it influences all of the other controllers, or it should do. Or it might influence the procedures that these controllers are, sorry, not procedures, the safety plans, the managed project management plans, program management plans, systems engineering plans that these organizations should be using. Might even affect the contract. And of course, all the stakeholders, all the players involved in this, they should be aware of what these procedures are, what these processes are, how they're written, what the roles and responsibilities are that are defined in there, and of course, any kind of terminology and constraints. So I've highlighted this as a candidate controller, not because I'm going to include it explicitly in the control structure. I might do, but for convenience, but that it impacts the control structure itself, many different parts of it. And of course, it can affect different parts of the control structure only in a way that somebody, a human being, picks it up, reads it, understands it, interprets it, and then implements it. So there's quite a bit, if you think about the jigsaw puzzle piece. So if this is the organization that creates the procedure, so if let's get this little grey bit here. Let's use one group. There we go. Let's steal that bit, put it over there. So let's say that this is our procedure SSP 30599. That might actually be available publicly. We might be able to tear that to pieces actually. Let's just do a quick Google search. This is probably a bit dodgy, a bit dangerous. Let's have a look. Oh yeah, the NASA safety review process. Yeah, there we go. So that's listed. We could probably stick that in what do we call it, Miro, and have a look at it. You'll notice this is a February 2015 document, and this may change over the time of the program. So you've got to be mindful of how these changes might affect the program. And of course, all procedures, all procedures, all processes, they all go through a similar life cycle of getting more and more specific and prescriptive. And then someone decides one day, oh, it's too complex, too prescriptive. Let's back our way off again and make it more goal-based. So they go through a sort of a cycle of being prescriptive to being goal-based and then back again. And those changes, they can have quite significant impacts upon the program and can lead to different stakeholders having different understandings of what is necessary, what is mandatory as part of any kind of safety process. You'll notice as well, this is the safety review process for the International Space Station program. So maybe that's used for the crewed flight tests or for the Starliner itself. And so the organisation has taken this program, this safety review process, and essentially using it warts and all, unless it's been customised, because there may be a bridge between this and what they've used in the Starliner program. They may have interpreted it or added some extra things or removed some things or made things mandatory that are not mandatory or made things that are mandatory in here not mandatory on a particular program. But yeah, I think I've said enough about that. But we've got a copy of it. We can have a look at it. Now, just another point as well, which I was moaning about the other day. So please forgive me. Is about referencing. So I did use a coloured pen the other day, purple, just to emphasise that it's a reference. So this is a reference that, in fact, let me change that to purple. There we go. That's better. So this process, right? So what I would expect if I was writing this process is I would include a little sort of reference number in here to the reference list inside this document, so that I know exactly what document that is, what version it is, what date it was written. Maybe even, if you want to go that far, is who is the owner or authority of that document, that process. And then, are there any other related keystone documents, such as a safety program plan, safety management plan, or a safety case report of some description? So how do these safety documents fit together, the safety engineering documents? Anyway, what I was saying is, so you'll have a controller that provides this procedure. It will go to the program. You'll have various stakeholders that will interpret that document, and then they will use that to then influence below them the various documents for that specific program. Well, that's in an idealized kind of fashion. Now, we don't know yet, based on what's written in this report. Maybe it comes out in the next few pages. We don't know how that's actually been implemented. We don't know how closely people have followed it. We don't even know if the safety team, for example, knew that that process existed and were, fully aware of its content and the roles and responsibilities I imagine that it provides, that it passes on. And so they may have been, may not have been really clear on what they actually should be doing, or maybe they were deviating and following a different plan, which was different and potentially contrary to that safety process. We don't know that yet, but they're the kind of things I'd like to tease out as we move forwards. And of course, what is the feedback about the fulfillment of this process? If this organisation puts this process out into the real world, what feedback should they request and get to make sure that this process has been, well, first off, that their process has been used, and if there's any issues with it, that it gets updated and changed, and of course how closely they're following it, and if they're not following it, what are they doing instead, and is that still acceptable? Does that meet the intent of this, or is it completely off the piste? So what feedback do they get? How often do they update this? Do they consider, for example, the programs that this process has been used? Because they might have multiple programs that are impacted by this. So how do they think about those aspects? How do they respond to them? Or don't they? Do they just say, hey, everyone, this is how we think you need to do safety, throws it over the fence into the into the arena where the programs are doing what they're doing? And is this actually appropriate? Are there any consequences for not following it? What is this feedback loop look like? Is this a feedback loop that looks at the suitability and sufficiency of the procedure, or does it also, or is there a separate loop that looks at how that procedure is actually working in the real world down here? What is that feedback? Is there any feedback? Is it relevant? They're the kind of questions I would expect to be asked by the investigation if it was shown that that was relevant. Okay, so let's have a look. So, in accordance with the safety review process, such that the safety review process can inform the preliminary design. Pardon me. Just to emphasize this, a phase 1 safety review should typically be performed prior to the preliminary design review. So if we're thinking about, let's say this is program management, they need to do a design review, a PDR. They also should be doing a phase 1 safety review. So if they don't do the safety review, if we go back to our types of control actions, so this document, this table here, this list here, if they do the safety review too late, then they can't influence potentially the preliminary design review. Does that sound like a good idea? No, that sounds like a contributory control action to me. So this controller, whatever organization that is, if there is evidence that they are not doing the phase 1 safety review before the PDR, then that should be an immediate sort of warning to the program. Hey, hang on a minute. This is the sequence of these control actions it is out of sequence. It's not appropriate. You could argue that it's a type of control action related to sequencing. So we should have safety review, PDR, and then post PDR review to make sure things have been dealt with. But if it occurs in this order, that's not really appropriate. And I know that programs, typically don't do it that way. That's why they've used the word typically there. But the point of having the safety review first is to make sure that you've got some hazards identified and you've set some safety requirements that are fulfilled by the preliminary design. And then if there's any gaps or issues with the preliminary design, they can be managed and dealt with appropriately. But if that's not what's happening, then of course that's an early risk indicator that something's not right with the way the program's been done. And we shouldn't be surprised when we're having issues, as explored in the live stream yesterday and the previous times. Okay, so actually, yeah, another point, another high horse topic is, where is the independent safety review aspects? How is independent safety auditing or assurance or advice or assessment or analysis done? How does that fit into this control process? The program being run, not doing safety reviews at the right time. How is that fed back to leadership, and then how is that actually addressed? Okay, so the CST100 Service Module Propulsion System PDR. So this is the Service Module Propulsion System PDR. So there are many other PDRs that are going on, I'm sure. There's many of them. And they all need to work together lockstep almost. Was held in January 2012. So this is very, very early in the program compared to when the event occurred, over 10 years before. During the CCI CAP CPC contract timeframes, don't know what that means, which was a year before the Phase 1 SRP, Safety Review Panel, is that? Safety Review Process, which began in May 2023 under the Certification Products Contract. Oh, that's what CPC means. Certification Products Contract. Right, hang on, I need to read that again. I'm drilling in too deep. So the CST PDR was held in January 2012 during the contract timeframes. So this is when they were getting the contracts ready to be signed, which was a year before the Phase 1. Right, I just understand now what it's saying. So January 2012. So this was like a year and a bit. 1201. And then 1305. So this is just some numbering I use to write things down quicker. So they did the Phase 1, which began in May 2013. So like over a year later. And it was under the CPC, the Certification Products Contract. So it's entirely possible that when this contract was written, they hadn't done much safety work, or the safety work they had done was very preliminary and may not have informed or influenced the design in a substantial way. And then that Certification Products Contract has been written in the context of that PDR without cognizance or appropriate cognizance of the safety aspects. And I've seen this quite a few times over the years, and it is incredibly frustrating when the project management team run off and get all the contract nonsense done without actually respecting that contract should have some level of involvement or influence from the safety process, such as if you've identified some hazards and set some safety requirements, or even if you haven't, you're able to say in the contract you expect the supplier to follow some kind of safety process that's robust and audited and everything else, and that if they do have any catastrophic failure conditions or catastrophic hazards, they need to inform you, and there needs to be an open and free exchange of safety-related information, and the contract itself should not undermine or hazard, cause problems for sharing of safety information and dealing with safety issues. There should be no opportunity for a supplier to say, "Oh, well, you didn't tell us, tier 1 contractor, you didn't tell us about XYZ hazards, so we've not mitigated it. So you need to pay us more money." That's not how the safety process and the contract process should work, and that should be carefully managed. You should have a safety manager involved in those kind of discussions. So the phased safety process was contractually levied as documented in DCC 1 00045901. Section 3.1 states the CCTS safety reviews. What is CCTS, everybody? Don't know. Will follow the phased safety process, which meets the intent of SSP 30599. Safety review process. Right. So this is the bridge I was describing earlier on. So this the contract says they will follow the phased safety process, which meets the intent of 30599. Now, if I was a betting man, I would suggest that there's something there that needs to be looked at from an investigation perspective, because that's a typical get out of jail free card. Oh, well, we've said in our contract that we're going to follow this other process, and we're going to follow the intent of it, without actually specifying what that actually means. And then also, the customer organisation cannot then hold this other organisation to account and say, well, hang on, you've said meet the intent of this process. You've not actually said how you're going to do that, or you've not provided adequate detail. And where you've not followed that, followed your own process perhaps, or followed the intent of the safety review process, there's nothing to sort of hold them accountable for that. So it's kind of, all I can say, it's not very robust control, if you see what I'm saying. Now, of course, I'm sort of ad-libbing a little bit here, because this is based on my own experience in other organisations over the years, so not this particular one. But because I'm a bit of a cynical safety engineer, which everybody should be, trust but verify, I would certainly want to go and have a look at that contract in detail, and I'm quite certain I could tear some big safety holes in it. Okay, so figure 6.410, characteristics of phased hazard reports, states the following characteristics for phase 1 safety data. All of the PHA, so I'm presuming that's preliminary hazard assessment, phase 0 plus. Not entirely sure. I'm presuming that's some kind of concept stage or earlier hazard identification and early analysis activity. More complete definition of controls verification approaches, not maintained after phase 2 reports were prepared. If new hazards were identified, new reports are prepared. Yeah, okay. I mean, I'd like to know what they mean by PHA. When you say PHA, what do you actually mean? What safety standard are you working to? My impression of that is it's probably MIL standard 882E. Again, I don't know that in terms of the timescales. This was, 2012, 2013. So yeah, MIL standard 882 language. When they say PHA, what do they actually mean by that? Because that could be just a generic label for choose whatever hazard identification analysis method you like. We're not going to be overly prescriptive. Or it could be we're going to use the one that we've always used for the last 50 years, and we're not going to change it unless you pay us more money kind of territory. And for me personally, you should stick STPA hazard analysis in there. But of course I'm going to say that. Okay, ISS hazard system. So this is the record. So this International Space Station hazard system. Contains the CST 100 phase 1 safety review data products. Okay, so this is some kind of database. And that record number blah contains some data products. So they will be some kind of safety documents, maybe preliminary, maybe not reviewed or signed off. Reviewed by NASA in partnership with Boeing, delivered in accordance with the system safety. Oh, there we go, everybody. System safety and reliability plan. Fantastic. So that document, I'd like to know what date that was. And another observation, just to sort of keep going on about this, is that if you have a document that's called something safety and reliability, or reliability, availability, maintainability and safety plan, I can almost guarantee that there's going to be some tension between safety and how to introduce stamp STPA or CAST into the program. Because safety and reliability are not the same thing. You can have a super duper reliable system that can kill, or you could have a super safe system that's incredibly unreliable. You could have both of these. And so seeing safety and reliability so closely stuck together is a bit of a warning, a bit of a smell going on there. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying there's a bit of tension there that needs to be carefully managed. And I'm sure there's some, RAMS engineers out there watching this, or thinking about this and what I'm saying, I'm being a bit blasphemous. I'm not trying to be derogatory or anything like that. I'm just saying that the mindset for doing a system safety assessment should not be all about reliability and failures and failure modes. And that's one of the points I've tried to maintain throughout this entire live stream series. Safety is not just about failures. But if we are called safety and reliability engineers, and that's what we do, our mindset is going to be subconsciously predisposed to deal with safety, reliability, and failures. And we're going to it's going to be very difficult for us, very challenging for us to take on the ideas and principles behind STAMP and STPA, which is more than just failures. It's about dangerous successes. It's about what went right that can kill, not just what went wrong. And of course, we're also moving away from thinking about trying to put numbers on everything and trying to do some magical maths and make up some numbers and convince ourselves that the failure rate is X and that this is the answer, this is the end. We need to move on beyond that. So yeah, I personally wouldn't like to have a plan that is too jaded by reliability, maintainability. It should be about system safety engineering. Anyway, let's get off that high horse. Give me some abuse in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are. Maybe I'm being a bit too strong. Give me some pushback on it. As part of the CLIN 2 of the CPC, don't know what that is. Would love to know what that is. The one fault tolerant pressurant system design was present in the Phase 1 safety products. So see the CST 100 Delta Phase 1 Part 2 CTS 0208 CPC final update Rev 3 which, oh my god. Look, please use a file name convention, which is a shortened unique identifier with a short description, and then just use the 6-figure date or 4-figure date. So year, month, day. There you go. Use that as part of the file name number instead of just writing big words like this. It's ridiculous. These document names should be human understandable quickly, because having a big long name like that not only annoys everybody, but it makes it incredibly boring and tiring and distracting for the people involved. Use something short and succinct. These things should be config controlled, not just natural language text with all this jazz inside it. Anyway, I'll get off my high horse. And again, this should be referenced in a reference list in the appendices. Anyway, hazard report document attached to IHS record 26014 for evidence. Right, so the following Phase 1 SRP. The thing, hang on a minute, let's just talk about that a little bit more. So this one fault tolerant system design was present in the Phase 1 safety products. And those Phase 1 safety products were dealt with a year after the PDR. So how was the safety team involved in the work to design the system? Were they involved in it? Or are these teams completely remote to each other and they throw things over the fence at the safety team? Because again, my sort of view is safety engineering, system safety engineering should be part of the systems engineering community. They shouldn't be sort of hived off in a separate discipline in a different building, a different location. They must, by definition, work closely with each other. Now, I can understand that you want the safety engineering analyses to have some level of independence. I totally get that. But we have to think about what type of independence do we actually mean? Because one of them is about setting requirements. One of them is about ensuring that requirements have been met and demonstrating it. And those two functions are distinct. And perhaps they could be done by the same team members, or they could be done by different teams, different team members across different areas. So again, there's some element of thinking, well, what is the team structure? What is the control structure around doing these activities, and how does this fit together? And again, the way that they are structured, whether they're separate or whether they are under a project manager that's not particularly good at leadership, I'm not saying that is the case here, but just on past experience myself, that can have a chilling effect. That can cause a toxic environment for these engineers to work in. And if there's a lot of time delays and issues with the program dates and the amount of work that's involved, that can be stacking up on people and needs to be carefully managed. So I've complained about too much there, so let's keep going. So the following phase 1 SRP meeting minute documents. Everyone loves writing meeting minutes, don't they? Anyway, attached to the IHS record 26014, same one, indicate NASA Phase 1 SRP meetings were held for CST from May 2013 through February 2014. So that was almost, well, not quite a year. So we've got Phase 1 Group 1 minutes, so May 2013, Group 2 minutes, a month later, or a couple of weeks later, July, month later, August, a few weeks later, Delta Phase 1, Part 1. What's this Delta Phase bit about? What does that mean? Part minutes, November 12, 2013. Okay, so a couple of months. Of course, there'll be holiday periods in there and all that good stuff. Then there's another minutes. So that's 2014-0602. So I'm presuming that's 6th of... There we go. I'm presuming that that's the 6th of February. But it could be the 2nd of June, couldn't it? Because, of course, why would we do the date? Anyway. I tease. The Phase 1 safety data presented to the ISS SRP from May 2013 to February 14 included hazard causes and control strategies. Hazard causes and control strategies. NASA approvals of the CST 100 hazard reports. So that sounds like there's multiple of those. In fact, that'd be quite interesting to see what is the information architecture. So do they have a preliminary hazard analysis report, a single document that then generates the list of hazards and high-level safety requirements, presuming they've generated them, that then get flowed out to individual hazard reports and then analysed? Or how do they do it? What safety analysis methods did they use? Did they use functional hazard assessment to define failure conditions and then use those for the top events on the fault trees and then did some fault tree analysis? Or what process did they actually use? What safety process did they use? Why was it adequate? Why did it make sense? So NASA approvals of the hazard reports are explicitly noted in the meeting minutes along with action item assignments and attendance logs. Fantastic. Just on action assignment, item assignments, it'd be interesting to know what open actions there were and whether there are any actions associated with this and how the actions are progressed and managed and dealt with. Because there is a lot of administrative burden involved in all of this jazz. And that administrative burden can get in the way of doing actual safety work. And so depending on how the team is organised and structured, how disciplined they are, how well trained they are, whether these are robust task management and action management systems they're working with, that can undermine the ability of the team to do the safety work and the willingness to go the extra mile and push when there is safety issues and there is potentially a hostile culture. Okay, and attendant. I'm not saying there is in this case. I'm just saying they're the kind of things I've seen over the years, and wouldn't be surprised if that's what's going on here. And attendance logs, all of which are indicative of completed Phase 1 safety review. Well, look, let's just. These things might be indicative of a completed safety Phase 1 review, but what is the outcome of a safety Phase 1 safety review? Is the procedural sort of finish line that you've had a review, or is there some other, engineering milestone consideration that, for example, the Phase 1 safety review is complete because we have a set of hazards and we have a set of safety constraints, and they have been included in the engineering requirements set, and those requirements have been fulfilled, as part of the preliminary design, or if there are any gaps, these are what the gaps are, and these are the action to close those gaps. I know it sounds really pedantic, but honestly, it needs to be carefully and tightly controlled. It can't just be, oh, well, you know, we've done a review, tick. What does that actually mean? Let's be specific, everybody. Let's not. I know it's a challenging, difficult thing to do all of this stuff. I know it's very busy. I know that it can be a bit tiring and a bit boring in some cases, but we really need to make sure we're fulfilling the intent of the engineering process, because it is an engineering process. It's not a paperwork exercise. It is important. Okay, the minutes of the Phase 1 Group 3 review held in July 2013. Let's just refresh our memory about the dates. Yeah, okay, so that is, where is it? July 2013. So it's in this time period here. Do call out a lack of fault tolerance issue as part of the CCTS 208 review. Fantastic. This is great. This is exactly what the process should be doing. Fantastic. Okay, tolerance issue as part of this review. Right, hang on. So this 2208 review, let's just go back to these fault trees. Right, CCTS-202-08 review. So is that this, the FMICA review that they identified this? Is that what we're talking about here? Let's just zoom in a bit. All right, let's take this and stick it over here and put a question mark on it. There we go. Double click, question mark, same document, question. Same document, Rocky question. If you've watched the film Hail Mary. Question, Rocky? Anyway, same document, don't know. Again, this is why I recommend having an appendix with a list of reference documents. So you can just have a small short reference in the body and just reuse it throughout the report. So it's clear we're talking about the same thing. Cause 6, leakage of seal of the hazard. That sounds like a different hazard, because this is about helium, and it's about the seal as opposed to the helium system, the pipe work and everything. So this might be very specific. That's confusing. That doesn't make sense. Is the same document? I don't know. I'm a bit confused. Let's put that out of the way. In fact, let's put a border around that so it's obvious. Where's the border? Come on, let's give it a border. We'll have a nice blue one. There we go. Put that out of the way. Oh, pardon me. Gosh, it's hot. Right, anyway, report. So the cause 6 of leakage of the seal of the hazard report was not approved. Not approved at phase 1 due to the fact the blankety blank did not meet the 2 fault tolerance requirements, but no mention is made of the pressurant system seals leaking fault tolerance for re-entry. Okay. While the phase 1 review is best held prior to the PDR to allow for the safety process to inform early design, evidence that the phase 1 review was unable to inform the design is lacking. Evidence that the review was unable to inform is lacking. I'm not being funny, but if the safety review is after the PDR, is that not the evidence that it cannot meaningfully inform the design? Unless you treat the safety process and the generation of documents as a paperwork exercise, and all the intellectual work and analysis and has been done, and that information has found its way to being able to inform the design, and then it's just documenting it and dealing with it afterwards. But even if it's that second scenario, these are complex systems with lots of people, and people get ill or leave the company and new people start. So this really should be documented. It's not, the documents should not be out of sequence. It's not just paperwork. It's the content that matters, and making sure there is a little, a place to hang your hat on. There has to be something fixed at some point in time, and they have to relate to each other. So I don't know. It's best held prior. It must be held prior. We really have to get better control of our complex project in this respect. And if there's a pushback on that, which I'm sure there will be, there always is, then what is the management organisation leadership going to do to make sure that the safety work gets done in advance, early when it's supposed to be? Because this is ultimately a leadership and resource question, really. Why are the safety team not able to get the support they need to be able to get this stuff done early? That is really the safety exam question that should be answered. We need to take this seriously. Anyway, recommendation OSMA, can't remember what that is. Safety Review 1. NASA safety processes should focus on system level safety, owned fault tolerance requirements, and ensure that data used to approve hazard control strategies at phase 1 is captured in the control language in the hazard reports directly. It should not be assumed to be in the verification data. So I think I'm interpreting that what this is saying is the control language in the hazard reports is essentially referring to these things here. So this is an FMECA, FMEA, and the control language, I think, is essentially this bit here. I think that's the impression I'm getting. But again, an FMEA, an FMECA is an analysis that you've done after you know what your functions are, after you know what equipment you're going to use, and everything else. So it's very late in terms of the V life cycle. Whereas if you used STPA earlier and up front in the very early stages, you could get very specific requirements very quickly. And then when the FMEA gets done, you can sort of join those two together, and the same goes for fault tree analysis and functional hazard assessment. That does leave me a bit cold, to be honest with you. I not really, yeah. It should not be assumed to be in the verification data. So verification data is very much on the right-hand side of the V life cycle. This is especially important when NASA does not own the vehicle and is not participating in subsystem designs. Right, so this is a recommendation for the NASA for those people, not necessarily the designer or design, design holder, design authority, should I say. There we go. So this is especially important when NASA does not own the vehicle and is not participating in subsystem designs. Early design review by NASA offers more opportunities to catch requirement violations. When those opportunities are limited, the opportunities that do exist must have increased due diligence. Yeah, I mean, I agree, but this is talking about the control structure from a context of NASA being on the outside of the design process of the organizations and teams that are doing that. What about the recommendations for those teams themselves and how they're organized and how they do their work? I've just noticed there is a comment, so let's just have a look. So Steve, hi Steve, good to see you. Thank you for coming along. With regards to safety being done early is affected by management support or lack thereof. Spot on, so true and frequently encountered. Yeah, absolutely. It's frankly, what's the term? As Jocko Willink, the US Navy SEAL officer, in a lot of his books, he essentially sums everything up to one statement, which is all problems are leadership problems. And so everything that happens, whatever the problem is, are due to fundamentally an issue with leadership. And so the question is, well, what are leadership doing about this? Or what did they or did they not do at the time all of this was going on? That's what the investigation should go and look at and make recommendations for. So thanks, Steve. Thanks for coming along. Type in the chat. Let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know what time zone you're in. Fantastic. So do not rely on verification data only to ensure the hazard control was written appropriately. This shifts the risk acceptance to a small group of subject matter experts, verification data reviewers, who may not be reviewing with fault tolerance in mind. Yeah, that's an important. If that's one thing I want to moan about today, it is make sure that you have some system safety engineers involved in the review, not just subject matter experts for the systems and functions themselves, because the system safety engineers have a very different view and thought process to those involved in the design and specification of these systems. And the example I give is, if you think about it this way, systems engineers very broadly, their mindset is about what problems have we got to solve and how do we solve them and make sure they're solved. Whereas safety engineers, they look at, well, how many different ways, what other problems do we have that maybe the system engineer hasn't anticipated? What are the solutions that the system engineers have put forward, and how do those solutions potentially cause problems? And then what must the solutions be to those second order problems, second order solutions? So you've got a completely different sort of perspective and appreciation. And only when those two mindsets come together do you get decent coverage. Now, of course, I can appreciate, the people that you have available, the resources you have available. Again, that's a people management thing. That's an organizational management thing. That's HR, that's recruitment. But they are important to safety. They should be considered as part of this. We've got another comment. Let's just have a look. So Steve, hi Steve, Atlanta, Georgia. Appreciate the opportunity to listen in. You're welcome, Steve. Hello to everyone in Atlanta, Georgia. That's really, really cool. So yeah, please comment if you've got any other experience you'd like to share, or any maybe not insider information, but you've got to be sensitive. But if you'd like to share experience, please let me know. Okay, so where we go. So control language should stand against the design of the system and will be supportable by data included in the hazard report. The STAR report correctly outlines opportunities during the phase safety reviews where the fault tolerance issues with the helium system should have been captured. The phased safety process as defined in SSP 30599 and implemented with the Boeing CST spacecraft development should have captured the lack of helium pressurant system fault tolerance, not simply phase 1. Yeah, so phase 1 caught it, but why was it not continued throughout the entirety of the process? I mean, it was mentioned. Actually, no, the helium issue was not. How can I put it? So earlier in this report, there's 3 sort of main safety topics. One of those is to do with the propulsion anomaly. One of them is to do with the helium leaks, the pressurant system fault tolerance. And the earlier problem was escalated and managed through the safety process, or appeared to be, but this one sounds like it fell down a gap. So why was that? Why was there a gap there? Why was that not adequately controlled? So recommendation number 9, safety review 2, hazard controls and their verification should be documented in hazard reports, clearly tying the supporting evidence to the controls. Ensure clarity in hazard controls. Single controls stating entire systems have fault tolerance should be avoided when they're against complex systems such as propulsion, electrical power, etc. Require evidence supporting control claims be present in hazard reports or included as support documentation. Examples for systems where fault tolerance relies on blankety blank include evidence of blankety blank in hazard reports. This allows reviewers to identify the design intent meets the fault tolerance claims. So it allows the reviewers to identify the design intent meets the fault tolerance claims. I mean, there are authors and there are reviewers. The authors should be writing the documents with a sufficient level of detail that it creates an audit trail, that it creates a safety case. We shouldn't, when we write documents, we shouldn't be relying upon reviewers to catch the things that we should be doing. And of course, we need to be thinking about who are the reviewers who is the audience of our documents, and making sure they're written in a way that makes sense to them. Try and anticipate the kind of questions that they've got to make the reviews easier for them and less painful. Because the more you think about your audience, the reviewer, the reader, if you think more about what their needs are and try and anticipate the questions that they've got, it makes the review a lot easier and means that you'll get less review comments and making the review process less tedious. Because I'm sure the reviews that you've experienced are very tedious, as the ones that I've done have been as well. So any effort to reduce that is welcome, I'm sure. Okay, so use specific verification evidence. So that should be referenceable. Have you got a master data list where you capture all the reference documents and the versions and dates and all of that kind of stuff? Use that master list. Don't just create your own. Avoid references to large data packages as the sole verification evidence for hazard controls. Yeah, I mean that is one of my biggest bugbears when reviewing documents like this. If you're going to stick a reference in, make sure it's clear to where in that document, in the source evidence, you're actually referring to, even down to the section heading and page number. By not doing that, you're not helping the review. In fact, you're undermining the capability of the reviewer and just costing more time and effort and rework and stress for everybody. So please be specific. Be very specific. Don't get lazy, because if you've ever done a dissertation for a master's degree or a PhD, you know how important referencing is. And if you don't do it right and you're not disciplined, it causes a lot of headaches and stress and wasted time and sleepless nights. So please just be diligent and disciplined with your references. Point to specific data within these packages that supports the hazard controls. Yeah, so I've just stolen my own thunder there. While using large data packages for verification evidence is acceptable, specific locations within the data packages should be identified in the hazard report. This should not be a should. This should be a must, mandatory. It should be a must, mandatory. That's what I would suggest if that was me writing a recommendation. Okay, observation number 2, safety review number 2. The structure of the Starliner service module propulsion system hazard reports contributed to the lack of two-fault tolerant helium pressurant system by NASA Safety. So the structure of the reports. This is interesting. Contributed to the lack of two-fault tolerant helium pressurant system by NASA Safety. That sentence doesn't quite make sense to me. Is it talking about the structure of the reports contributed to the lack of that system two-fault tolerance being identified by NASA Safety independent reviewers? Or what does that mean? I think it's probably the latter. As captured in the STAR investigation report. So I think that's later in this document, actually. The verification of the propulsion system claim of fault tolerance was not adequate. Yeah, okay, get that. CCTS 1601 cause 9. So hang on, CCTS 1601. Is this other? Yeah, this hazard report here, right. So let's just... I think that's what this is saying. It seems like it. So let's just go to, where were we? We're over here, aren't we? CCTS 1609. That's right, isn't it? Let's just zoom back. Yeah, there we go. That's it. Pardon me. Cause 9, Control 1 states the SM service module propulsion system redundancy provides dual fault tolerance to the loss of translational maneuver capability. Verification 1A was closed to the supporting evidence of the guidance, navigation and control CDR critical design review presentation. That doesn't sound right. provides dual fault. Well, it doesn't, does it? So why would it say that? I'm not sure this is right, this, because it says local effects. These are the design controls and these are the local effects. But it doesn't actually relate the design controls to the local effect or the specific safety requirements. And again, like I said, like I moaned yesterday, if you did an STPA analysis for this, you would identify very, very specific requirements for the control actions, the feedback, the control process, and the controller itself. You wouldn't just say, oh, we've got robust design, we've got screening, we've got qualification test, and we've got inspection. You would have very specific requirements that can be traced into verification and validation evidence or tests, test definitions. Anyway, let's move on. I've moaned about FMEA too much yesterday already. Right, where are we? So the guidance, navigation and control CDR presentation does inform some aspects of fault-tolerant design, but does not contain information on the blankety blank. The hazard report CCTS 1601 does not contain any technical information to back up the claim 9, cause 9, control 1. But it might not be intended to do. And this thing about hazard report, for me, an FMEA is not a hazard report. When you use the term hazard report, and maybe this is just a difference between my UK experience and the US mindset, US language. A hazard report to me is a report that looks at and explores a particular hazard. Whereas when you're looking at an FMEA, you're kind of starting off from a set of postulated failure modes, and then you're working forward in time to postulate what the effects are. And then it's only based on these safety-related effects, severe effects, that you then say, oh, well, there's a potential hazard contributor here. But then you have to go to a new level of abstraction to understand, well, what is the system hazard? What is the system state that leads to a loss? And how do these failure modes contribute to it? Fundamental. And again, this goes, actually, I wonder if I've got a slide. Stand by, I might have a slide that I can refer to and moan about. Where is it? Let's have a look. Is there a definition of a hazard in these slides? No, I've not got a hazard. Oh, there it is. That's it. There, look. So if you use the definition of a hazard as used in the stamp literature, a hazard, square brackets, notice. So whenever you see square brackets in my teachings, my presentations, whatever, I'm emphasizing that the English word that you see, I'm using a very specific definition. I'm not necessarily using the definition that you are used to, that you automatically would refer to. So this is the definition I'm referring to. A system state or set of conditions that, together with a particular set of worst case environmental conditions, will lead to an accident or loss. And we could define that as a system state or condition, or if it's appropriate, depending on what it is you're looking at, you might want to define it as an event or a time-limited situation that you have control or influence over. Because you, like an operator, they won't necessarily have much control or influence over system states. They may have control over the entry into those states or the events that lead to the entry into those states, but they might not be able to control the state itself. So when you define hazards through this lens of this definition, just be mindful about how you define them, either as states or events. But anyway, so if we're talking about a failure mode, a hazard is not in this definition is not fundamentally not a failure. It could be caused by a failure, or conversely, it could be caused by what I call a dangerous success. The system has behaved as designed, it's got in a state, or it's an event has occurred that, together with a worst case set of environmental conditions, will lead to a loss. So it doesn't have, the hazard doesn't have to exist because of a failure. It could be because that's how the system is designed. So again, our definition of hazard and the way we use it across the program can influence what we focus on in the safety assessment, and especially if we're doing a failure modes and effects analysis. So there's a bit, maybe it's me as a layperson looking at this, but I mean, I've got some of this. I got a bit of this perspective from some of the stuff I have done in space, where the words and labels used for different documents are, for me, they're a bit misleading. They're a bit unclear. They're not as, let's put it this way, they're not as clear to me as in civil air transport using ARP 4761. But even ARP 4761 is limited because, again, that focuses on failure conditions, which I've just moaned about. Failure is not the only problem that we safety engineers need to deal with. It's dangerous successes. Anyway, I'm not doing a full-on STPA stamp training today. I'm trying not to. If you want some stamp STPA or CAS training, I do provide that. So if you want to visit my website, send me a message. This is my website, whiteley-safety.co.uk. If you need some help, please click this green button. I need help now. Send me a message, and I'll set up a call. We can have a conversation and see how I can possibly help. And likewise, with regards to these live streams, this case study that I'm doing, the intention is, I'll just move off the side of the screen. The intention is that I'm going to call a live workshop held on Zoom, where we get together live, talk about this case study, talk about your experience in system safety and accident analysis, accident investigation through the lens of STPA and CAST and STAMP. And we can talk about this live, and that's a complimentary live workshop. So if you go to my website, click on that button, stick your name and email address in there, join the waiting list. When I'm ready to do that, after I've done all of these live streams and finished reviewing the report, I'll set a date and we can get together and go through it together live. Okay, so where was I? I was just on a high horse. Let's get back to where we were. So, although it is understood that the spacecraft is a complex vehicle, not easily explained in simplified drawings, okay, blankety blank of critical systems must be outlined within hazard reports. Yes, it should. There should be appropriate models within hazard reports so the system designs can be readily reviewed by the safety panel representatives. Safety panel. So is this an independent safety panel, or is this a project safety panel that's part of the design process? Because, an independent one has different needs and intentions and authority over the safety engineers involved in the project itself. So I'd be keen to understand the context of that label, who that is, what that is. It might be defined in that safety process that this safety process, we'll have to look at this in a bit. This is 95 pages, by the way, so that's quite large. Maybe I'll stick that in and have a think about it. Anyway, the final approval of the hazard reports comes after subject matter experts agree the verification evidence sufficiently supports the claims of hazard controls. So final approval, who does the final approval? What is that control action? So let's get our little jigsaw piece out again. Let's have a think about it through the lens of this jigsaw piece. Who or what is this controller that has the responsibility for final approval of the hazard reports? Is it the author and the responsible party for the report that signs it off, but they can only sign it off if an independent review panel gives them the thumbs up? Is that how it works? Again, I'd expect to see a reference to a process for how safety documents are reviewed and signed off. And maybe that's that SSP 30599 that we were talking about. Interestingly, this reference is 30599, but the file name is 41000C. Don't know why that is. Anyway, so final approval. Yeah, so how can they approve the reports? Where is it? How can they approve the reports if this fault tolerance stuff is not addressed properly? How can it be approved and move on after that point? Are there some criteria or assumptions or controls over, what would you call it? Constraints? No, conditions on that approval. It is approved with these following conditions. Hazard reports comes after subject matter experts agree the verification evidence sufficiently supports the claims of hazard controls. Well, they shouldn't be agreeing that. It shouldn't be getting approved if that's the case, because that's not what happened. When the hazard controls are written as vague or generic and reference non-specific verification evidence, such as an entire guidance, navigation, and control CDR presentation versus specific data or components of a large piece of supporting evidence, the rigor of the safety review is lost. Yes, I agree with that absolutely wholeheartedly. I've had that experience myself, and it is incredibly frustrating. Yes, risk acceptance shifts to outside of the safety. Well, it's when it says risk acceptance shifts to outside of the safety process. There's a bit of smoke and mirrors here. There's a bit of subtlety to be mindful of. The real risk acceptance, as written in the procedures and processes, is what matters. But the reality of how the control structure actually implements that is very different. And so the people that should have the roles and responsibility for accepting these things, they don't actually, that's not how it works. So people that don't have those roles and responsibilities, they assume those responsibilities but without realizing it. So things get signed off potentially by people or by committees that really don't have any business signing it off. And the thing is, they don't necessarily realize that they are taking responsibility upon themselves and don't realize necessarily how they're supposed to wield that responsibility. I've seen it many times. It is very frustrating. Anyway, let's keep going. When using references to large design review documents to close a hazard control, the reviewers of said products, such as NASA GNC team, GN and S team, in this example, may not be reviewing the document with the focus of whether it adequately closes a hazard control claim of the fault tolerance of an entire propulsion system. Absolutely. But that's why when setting the criteria for the review of a document, there should be a setting of intentions. What is the purpose of this review? And does it align with the procedure, or is it different to what is required by the procedure? And if it's different, that should be explicit so that everybody involved knows what the scope of the review is and what's inside and what's outside and what the gaps that remain. And those gaps should be given a specific action and managed through some formal action tracking system that cannot just be ignored and closed off after a period of time has happened. So yeah, I mean, I can't say too much, but some of the stuff I did with the European Space Agency is similar activity to that. So reviewing documents and making sure that the right people are reviewing things for the right reasons. Okay, so recommendation number 10. VCN deliverables. Oh, that was VCN. That meant something. We talked about that yesterday. VCN. I put it on a model, didn't I? Yes, I did. Or did I? Come on, Si, where is it? There it is. I knew it was there. Verification closure notice. So this is like an I interpret it as something that is provided as part of the administrative activity. So VCN deliverables for future Starliner missions should have the associated case matrix for GNC Monte Carlos evaluated to verify accurate hardware fault tolerance. So Monte Carlo analysis, I think that's referring to, but a minute ago we were talking about FMEAs and hazard reports. There's not enough here for me as a layperson to appreciate or understand, so I think that could do with being addressed a little bit, add some extra detail for us lay people. Reruns of the GNC Monte Carlo should be performed and verify capability of the vehicle, including loss of helium manifold, and verify no additional failure cases are missing, lacking. Again, the focus on failure. There may be cases that are not failures that need to be considered. But if you're using failure-focused analyses, you're not going to find them. You're going to miss them and then be surprised when something bad happens. Okay, recommendation 11. SOMD, verification of fault tolerance. What is it? SOMD, what's that? Space Operations Mission Directorate. There we go. So let's paste that in there so we don't forget. So that is an entity of some description. NASA's associate administrator. All right, so it's Space Operations Mission Directorate, whoever they are. Where is that? There it is. Put it there. So they are an entity that may be candidates for inclusion in the control structure model. In future programs, plan to invest in and utilize tools for automated evaluation of design data for mapping fault tolerance and other design requirements instead of relying specifically on human inspection of schematic data. I think that's a great recommendation, but it has to be done very, very carefully, because if people know that that happens and that it's reliable, they might start adapting and not necessarily being as diligent as you really need them to be. So I'd be very careful, because this recommendation fundamentally changes the control structure around how these humans do their work. And we've got to be really, really careful with that, because we could introduce some pretty nasty new ways of killing people and destroying the program. Keep human evaluation in the loop, yeah, fantastic, but increase use of evaluation tools to catch unique and nuanced design imperfections, such as helium legs of the propulsion system. Yeah, but I mean, this is not going to solve the problem. If you did an STPA hazard analysis, that would go so much further than just using tools after the fact, honestly. I'm not just saying that because that's what I want to happen. I'm saying because that's what I believe is necessary. And having done similar in the recent past myself, we found some fantastic things. Retroactive incorporation of this technique is unlikely to be practical, as it assumes a new design documentation philosophy that should be incorporated at the start of a new program. Okay, why are we recommending it then if it's for new programs? Anyway, observation 3, verification of fault tolerance. The VCN CCT Rec 1130-ATC autonomous deorbit verification evidence did not contain helium manifolds in the associated case matrix. Okay, so recommendation, insufficient processors for design deficiency. NASA should verify that the provider has sufficient tools. So NASA should verify the provider has sufficient tools and process for addressing issues or concerns. NASA should verify the provider has a speak up process. Yay! Because that's going to work, isn't it? That kind of stuff is only going to work if the culture and organizational structure actually supports it and promotes it, and leadership actually support it. Don't just say they do; they actually do, and they embed it in the way that they work every day. I mean, the UK National Health Service has a speak up process, but in certain organisations, it's just basically an opportunity to raise your hand, raise your head above the parapet for leadership to, snipe you out. That's, so it's nice in theory, but how it's actually implemented and practiced is critical. So to appropriately elevate critical safety concerns and provide sufficient training to ensure all team members are aware of processes and safety priorities. So that wasn't said in the report, but I was talking about these topics because that's my experience across many organisations and industries. So I was kind of already talking about this. But yes, absolutely. If we take our little control structure, control loop jigsaw piece, for the controller, whoever that is, the safety engineer, the project manager, whoever it is, for them to be able to do a good job, provide safe control actions, they need to have appropriate control algorithms and decision making. So they need to be trained. They need to have the knowledge and experience to be able to do it, the skills, but they also have to have the process model and beliefs to support that. So if we're talking about expecting people to speak up, we need to make sure that they know how to speak up, and that they don't believe at the back of their minds they're going to get fired for raising safety issues. And of course, if people are fired for raising safety issues, how does the organisation actually deal with that? Because that, human resources and potentially cowboy project managers, all that kind of, senior leaders behaving in ways that get rid of people, that really needs to be detected by the safety management system and dealt with appropriately. That kind of retributive action is a surefire way to undermine safety culture and potentially kill astronauts in orbit. Anyway, let's keep going. So, organizational factor 7: insufficient processes for design deficiency. There were insufficient processes and tools in place to adequately address when lack of fault tolerance was identified on Starliner, directly contributing to the inability to address this discrepancy. The emails from the operations team to address fault tolerance represent a missed opportunity to address deorbit capability. Yeah, I mean, that just blows my mind. They were sending emails for a number of years, and that was just, well, it doesn't appear to have been dealt with. Why was that? So if you've got a team sending emails that says, hey, there's a fault tolerance issue here, how is it lost in the process? You know, what's actually gone on? And I suppose that's the purpose of this investigation. Go and explore those control loops, understand why did the control structure allow this situation to happen. So there we go. So that is page 101, everybody. Look at that. We're a third of the way through of 311 pages almost, give or take a few fluff pages. So we're doing well. This is fantastic. So looking at the time, it's 18:20 local time here. So let's see. So we've got this next section is what's this next section called? So this is section 4.8. Common observations and organizational factors. I think what we'll do is we'll look at that tomorrow. We'll do that on the live stream tomorrow. We'll pick that up. So as I say, if you want to get involved in a complimentary safety case study workshop where I'm going to talk about what I found in this report and what we can find with using STPA or CAST, and how we could make recommendations, how we could actually solve a lot of these issues earlier using STPA or CAST, please come along to the workshop. This is the QR code. Use your phone to scan that. Let me just make it a bit bigger on the screen so it's a bit easier for you to scan it. Or you could type the address in, or you could just visit my homepage and click the button, stick your name and email address in there, join the waiting list, and then I'll let you know when that session is going to be. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for taking part. And thanks, Steve. Thanks for your comments. That's fantastic. I'll see you on the next live stream tomorrow. And we're going to keep going until Friday, see how far we go. As I said, we've just cracked page 100. So we've got another 200 odd pages to go. But hopefully we can get through that a bit quicker as we go on. But my intention is to keep the live streams going until I've finished the report. Then I'll put together a slide pack. Then I'll send out a call-in notice to everyone who's joined the waiting list. And then we'll get together live and we'll go through this together on Zoom and share some experience. So thank you very, very much for watching. And I'll see you on the live stream tomorrow. Take care and good night.